Good evening, Dr. Cadet. So happy you could be here, and we're happy to see you. We know that we have other dinner guests coming on, and this evening our topic is bridging the racial divide. How does systemic racism affect the average George and Georgette? Now, for our audience, for many people that are not familiar with a virtual civic dinner, we are partnering with the King Center, and most of you guys are familiar with the King Center in Atlanta, Georgia. I think we all are familiar with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So we're partnering with his center this evening, and we'll be talking about different aspects of closing that gap. If we all think that can happen, each participant will be sharing with us as we talk about it. And we want you guys to be very comfortable and know that you can come on as well. If you go to your Facebook pages, and if you look at your Facebook pages, you will see where you can join us live. But all we ask is that if you join us live, is that we don't interrupt while another person is talking, and we always ask that you mute yourselves while we're talking. So another one of our dinner guests has arrived, Ms. Maya Bahl. Good evening, Ms. Bahl.
Good evening, Melvin. Good evening, Mr.
This is Dr. Cadet, and I'm going to ask the two of you, because we don't want to hold our audience up. I'm going to ask first Dr. Cadet, if you will share with us who you are and what you do as we move forward on our topic, bridging the racial divide.
So my name is Lud Cadet. I'm a physician. I'm trained in neurology and also in psychiatry. I work for the National Institute on Drug Abuse also, where I do research on the clinical and basic science aspects of addiction, which is a big issue for all of us. So, and I've written several papers on the issue, and I'm willing to share information that I've already gathered with your public.
And we're so happy that you're here. Maya, will you share with our audience your information, please?
Thank you, Mr. Melvin. Thank you, Dr. Cadet. My name is Maya. I'm just a community member and writer where Mr. Melvin and I met while on the Good Men Project. So I'm happy to be with you all, Mr. Melvin and Dr. Cadet.
Well, listen, we're happy that you're here. We want a diverse group as we talk tonight. We have other guests that'll be joining us, and we will just keep our show moving. Now, Dr. Cadet, as we talked earlier, you know, we all know that there's so much talk about bridging the racial gap and so much discussion and that kind of thing. But I do want to say respectfully, for those of us that are not physicians and that do not have the expertise as being psychoanalysts, etc., and I say that respectfully, will you share with us, sir, some of your aspects, maybe 3-5 minutes to start us off, about if someone came to you and talked about bridging a racial divide, what would you say to them, to those persons?
Okay, so I think it is very important that if we're going to move forward, that we also look back at the history of what led us to where we are today. So there are a lot of issues regarding legal aspects of social determinants of the racial disparities in health. So we'd have to go through those histories. We would have to talk about syphilis experiment when Black men were kept off medications without treatment, even though a white physician knew that there was a therapeutic way of addressing the treatment for syphilis in the Black community. We would also have to talk about the issues about white surgeon who did experiments on enslaved women in order to perfect their skills before using these skills in white women. We also would have to talk about this theft of cells from Henrietta Lacks without her knowing. And institutions have made quite a bit of money with these cells. And lastly, and very importantly, we would have to talk about the problems of infant mortality, Black infant mortality, when these Black infants are being taken care of by white physicians. Those are issues that we would have to discuss first, because the truth will free you, okay? So we know that. So once we discuss that, then everybody is on the same wavelength. We would have to start talking about educating the people, okay? Improving schools so that young Black men and women know that it is possible for about science, to learn science, to go to medical school, to become physicians and nurses, so that they can provide the proper care that Black communities need. The summer is really prime example of what I'm talking about. That with the COVID-19, this really showed how racial disparity in healthcare was very, very detrimental in terms of how African-American Black men and women were dying for COVID-19, while if there were no such disparity, this would not have been an issue. So those are the kind of issues that we would have to discuss. And then most importantly, to finish, school, medical school. We need more Black medical schools. We need more medical schools that are going to train young Black men and women to become physicians and nurses who are going to spend almost all of their time taking care of Black patients. We need those, and in order to do that, we need the investment. We need the financial investment from many sources so that this medical school could be successful.
And you know, Doctor, as you share that, if you will, if we can just talk quite candidly about medical school, medical profession, and I know we have another one of our dinner guests have joined us, Ms. Andrea Reynolds. And Andrea, please come on and introduce yourself and share with our audience who you are and what you do as we talk about bridging this racial divide. Now, Dr. Cadet has given us a great insight, and a great insight, I should say, and a great start on this whole conversation. And I'd like for the ladies to jump in and talk to us a little bit about some of the things that Dr. Cadet is saying, because we would like to pinpoint this particular talk, and we will have many more. Hopefully you guys will join me, but we would like to pinpoint this particular talk on the aspect of health and healthcare and the disparities. If we're going to talk about bridging the racial divide, then we're going to have to admit, whether people like it or not, that there are disparities. So Andrea, will you share with us, please, who you are and what you do?
Hi, my name is, and I am a math teacher slash, but first I was an engineer in the oil field, so I was a chemist in the oil field, and then I became a math teacher, and now I am a small woman business owner for a math company that I started with another minority female, and we specialize in foundational math. So we specialize in helping people get to where they need to, also in the workplace, and help them with their math skills that are usually needed when you're applying for a new job, or you're trying to get into those trade school type careers, as electrician or a plumber, or becoming a wastewater superintendent. Math that's involved in the oil field and so forth, as basically they call it now, wages, livable wages type jobs, but usually math keeps them from getting those high-end jobs or even livable jobs because of the math that they're missing. And that's what we bring to the table as being math teachers and also engineer, knowing what's needed to get into a career sector and so forth. So that's what, so this is a real light, I guess, way to expose what's going on out there for minorities who are left behind during the grade schools, middle schools, high school, and are not performing in the colleges. So we're help fill in the gaps for mathematics for minorities and the Browns.
Well, thank you so much for that, Andrea. And so tonight, audience, as you see, we have a diverse group of dinner guests, and we will be pinpointing a lot of things as our show continues. However, right now, what we want to do is Dr. Cadet, if we can look at, you mentioned several entities as far as the Tuskegee experiment, and as far as the what word am I looking for? I will let you tell me what word I'm looking for as we talk about stealing cells and doing experiments.
Oh, you're talking about Henrietta Lacks cells.
Yes.
It's a very important story because she was admitted at Hopkins Medical Center back in the day, and she had cancer, and they used the cancer cells to make a line that can live forever. So they immortalized her cell, and they were able to use her cells to do a lot of testing. So that when she had the surgery for the cancer, they never told her that they were going to use these cells. And the university profited from using the cells, but the family members at the back never really got any profit. They were able to patent the cells, and they even use the abbreviation of her name in the cells, but the family, until recently, never got any financial recompense for her cells being used. So this is abuse of power in the medical field. And so those are the type of issues, as I mentioned before, that we would have to discuss. The syphilis experiment is one that almost everybody knows, but then Henrietta Lacks story is one that's really hush-hush that people haven't talked about. The other thing that I talked about is the abuse of Black bodies. I forgot to mention that earlier, the sterilization of Black women by white physicians during the eugenics movement, because they were trying to stop the birth of Black babies. So those are the type of issues that we would have to talk about. If there were enough Black physicians, Black teachers around, I don't think, it's very unlikely, I should say anyway, that those type of abuses might have occurred. I think it's very important that your other guest, who is a math teacher, this issue is such a big issue in terms of math, poor knowledge of mathematics as kids go through primary, secondary, middle, high school. They're not taught math properly. So when they take SAT tests, they do poorly. So it's really not a problem of Black intelligence. It's a question of people poorly teaching Black kids. When I was in college, I used to tutor math also. It was really sad to experience the fact that there were these young Black kids coming into school and colleges, and they couldn't do basic math. And that's not their fault. It's the fault of the poor teaching in those schools. That's why I think it's very important that math be taught properly, because math is really the foundation of everything scientific. Whether you're in engineering, the research that I do, every time we always have to do statistics at the end of our experiment to prove. So math is essential skill that people do need to learn before we can bridge the racial gap.
Oh, certainly. I see we have another dinner guest here. Mr. Patrick Stewart, will you chime in, please, sir, and let everyone know who you are and what you do, sir?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Stewart.
Good evening.
I have the honor of being one of Mr. Melvin Lars, Coach Melvin Lars' old students and former players. So grateful for that. But right now I'm currently just retired. From
Patrick, may I interrupt you 1 second?
Yes.
We can't see that handsome face, brother. There he is.
Yes.
Okay.
How y'all doing?
How you doing, Pat?
Hi.
So yeah, just settling in. We it's been a long day. Actually, today was supposed to be my off day, but I got called in for a meeting and that went over.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, how about that? But yeah, so I just retired recently from the United States Air Force, and now still actually working in the same area that I was working in, the medical education and training campus here at Fort Sam Houston, Joint Base San Antonio. And I work in the faculty management, faculty credentialing. We bring on board all of our instructors. We have 50 medical programs that we have here. So all of those soldier, sailor, and airmen, we have all tri-service. And actually we have, we quadruple it because we actually do coasties as well. But we train them in all areas of medical. But we also have our advanced courses with our nurses, critical care, a couple other programs that we also house at the medical education training campus. So that's what I do. So I'm just enjoying life right now. I'm enjoying the second half of life and getting started into this next one. I kind of, when I logged on, all I heard was education. So I just came here to just glean from some bright minds that I know are here and figure out how we can do things better.
Well, listen, first of all, we are happy that you're here. Dr. Jean Lud Cadet is a physician himself. He's a researcher at Mount Sinai School of Medicine in New York. Andrea is a former engineer. She runs a business called cMA+TH. And Maya is a community activist worker. She works really hard. She helps us out. She does. So Maya, as I'm sharing with them what you do, I know that you and I have been in several conversations, and I know sometimes you are working toward different aspects. So I won't let all the cats out of the bag today. But if we can continue, Pat, I'll bring you up to date real quickly. The topic is bridging the racial divide. How does systemic racism affect the average George and Georgette? And Maya, we have other guests that are coming on that do not identify as African American. And when you hear conversations that are, and if you're not comfortable, just tell me you're not comfortable. When you hear conversations by African Americans that you haven't met, a professional, you have a physician in Dr. Cadet, and then you have Patrick, who works in the medical and education field, and you have Andrea, who's a former engineer, and then of course you have me. Does this setting mirror many of the things that you've heard or you've been told about people of color? Because, you know, Black people, may I just say very candidly, Black people?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Melvin. So what I would say is that I'm learning about this whole experience, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whatever. And one research that has really stuck out to me that I've read during this time, I don't know, for a time it was the book to read during this time. It's How to Be an Anti-Racist. For me, having Black friends and reading this book, I definitely did identify things that I even didn't know, being an Indian American and Asian American. And the book, I think, does a good job of identifying issues, growing up issues, and just making me realize that, wow, there's a whole facet I didn't even know about within the Black community. So that book has been eye-opening. So being educated on that book has been life revealing and life opening. So I'm happy for these types of conversations where I do foremost enjoy just sitting back and being educated on things I didn't know about. Another thing I do want to bring up that was,
she froze for a minute, guys. She'll be back momentarily. But yeah, again, while Maya is coming back to us, please understand, gentlemen and ladies, that the virtual dinner is a conversation. You know, anytime you want to add some information or share or ask questions of one another, etc., it doesn't have to be prompted by me. And I didn't share that in the letter, and I should have. So we're having an open conversation, and we have other guests while we're waiting on Maya to get unfrozen that are scheduled to come on. They told me they may be a little late, but we have some of our, and you guys know how I am, we have some of our less melanated brothers that are supposed to join us, as at least one as well, and we just want to have an open conversation. So,
Brother Lars, I would like to make a correction though.
please.
About me, I'm no longer at Mount Sinai. I'm right now working at the National Institute of Health.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's very important.
Yes, that's
because
very.
I left Sinai a few years ago.
Yeah, that's very. Thank you for correcting me.
I think it's important that people don't think I'm still in New York.
it is important, and you know what, Dr. Cadet, I knew that. Senior moment. And we need to make that very clear. But listen, as we move forward, and as we're talking about bridging this racial divide, when you, and any of you can answer this, when you encounter people that look like you as it relates to, quote, color, and people that do not look like you as it, quote, relates to color, and they seem to have consternation and problems when you bring up the conversation of there being a wide divide when it comes to fairness, when it comes to job opportunities, etc. How do you address that?
So I'll jump in. One of the things that for me, and just addressing it because I've had to on so many occasions, is really just to get people to understand. I got lucky in having when you're teaching, you have a classroom setting, right? And I want people to be able to look past the color and really see the need, you know. So one of the things that I would do for my class, because I would have wanted somebody to do it for me, was what I did was each time they came in, I would normally give them a week or so, and I would, well, initially, everybody does this icebreaker, right? In everything, everywhere we go, we do icebreakers, and we give so much information about ourselves, but over an amount of time, we don't revisit. In a 13-week course, we would probably come back maybe about the 4th, 5th week, try to get them, and I would ask them across, somebody clear across the room, say, hey, what's that person's why? Why are they here? And what the tendency is, again, coming from a military community, is you can float back to where you're from. You can float back and also go back to just what you know. And I wanted to break that. I always wanted to break that. So get them to know their why. If I can get you to understand that I have a family, just like you have a family, I am, trying to better myself, just like you try to better yourself to elevate your family, just like I'm trying to elevate mine. And getting that across and getting people to see the human side, the need, and why I'm here, the why, it broke a lot of barriers. You were able to break a lot of barriers that way. If you allow people to go back in their circles that they are comfortable in, they'll never go outside of it. And I know we're talking about bridging the racial gap. That's why I'm having such a hard time with the administration's choice to remove the racial diversity training. We need that. It has broken down barriers that otherwise people are not going to talk about on their own. So just getting people to understand the why of other people who don't look like them, they will actually see that they are really the same underneath whatever the melanin is, or less melanated, whatever it is.
Patrick, as you share that, and again, this is for all of us, guys, this is a general conversation. Would you say that that's the intent, of the current administration. And a lot of times people, well, there's a young man that, and I'll name him. His name is LaRon Barton, and LaRon is a freelance writer. He does TED Talks, etc. He asked a question one conversation when we were discussing our current gentleman that's in office, and he said, "So even though we as Black people may not like it, how does he affect you personally?" And I said to him at the time, well, first, we were just talking about each other's opinion. And I said, well, first of all, that's a selfish question, just to think about how it affects us personally, because of all the things that you're saying now, Pat, is because of how people get comfortable. But little did I know it was going to affect me personally, because on November the 4th, I was supposed to be in North Carolina doing a motivational speech to the naval base there. And I have a copy of that letter that came from the White House, because they sent it to me with the apologies of that letter of us having to cancel that diversity training. So I think people, sometimes don't get it. And that not only does it affect maybe one household, but it affects so many households when you have people wantonly not wanting to bridge this racial gap. Dr. Cadet or Andrea, would you like to speak to that or something different?
Well, I'd like to say something. I think it's very important for us to understand the historical record in reference to the racial gap. I mean, the historical record is very clear as to why the gap was created. I mean, it wasn't something that came out of thin air. The gap was created from the time of slavery. After slavery, during Jim Crow, there was a reason for that, because the gap allowed people, white people in power, we should say it very clearly, it allowed white people in power to benefit from the gap. Mm-hmm. So those people in power back then are still in power today. So as long as we have people in power and using the racial hatred to perpetuate their power, we're not going to be going anywhere. So we can talk to people and we can do a lot of diversity training, which I think those things are very important. But the idea that we can bridge the power while these other folks, white people who are benefiting, who are becoming billionaire, multimillionaire, who are controlling everything in the United States, as long as we don't face those facts that the gap was created to benefit them, we're not going to go anywhere. So the way as I mentioned at the beginning, the way I'm approaching it now is more than just interaction with white people or Hispanic people. I think it's very important that we ourselves, Black people, contribute to our own elevation in terms of teaching. So that's why I was glad that your other guest is doing a lot of stuff related to mathematics. So we're going to teach those skills to our own people, trying to get money to increase our medical school so that we can train our physicians, so that the racial inequity in health and the inequity in science can not disappear, but be diminished. As long as you have a group of white people who control everything related to the supply and the creation of the gap, it's going to be very difficult if we don't take control of things like teaching math, teaching science, opening medical school, get more physicians, get more nurses, so that our people don't die. If our people continue to die, we will not have a gap to worry about, because we're all going to be dead. So we need to do these activities so that we can improve ourselves, and then
Well,
basically the
certainly.
gap out of the way.
Andrea, would you like to respond? It looks like she stepped away. Maya, we're happy that you returned, and we're just continuing our conversation about that gap being, people being not necessarily working to lessen the gap. I have a question, gentlemen, if you, okay, Andrea is back. Andrea, would you like to address that? Did you hear Dr. Cadet and Mr. Stewart share their comments? Would you like to address that?
Well, with Dr. Cadet responding to that, for those who want to stay in control. And so I completely agree because, you know, personally, I know that they don't want to make room for others to be a part of what's going on, to benefit others, to encompass and invite others to be partakers and making mankind better and to make equality for one another. And so I very much, you know, agree with that. And it still is going on today. They don't want to make room. And we thought, you know, we were, you know, having, you know, new freedoms and, you know, and equality and so forth. But it's just, you know, 2020 has just continued to reveal and to expose what's really going on. And there's no way to, but unless the very top is for equality, it's going to continue because they want to keep control and they want to keep their pocketbooks filled.
I think Andrea and I are 100% in agreement on that issue.
I was asking if you are comfortable sharing with the group about some of that craziness that you're experiencing right now. Dr. Cadet alluded earlier, you know, to the sales being harvested in universities, and people are still becoming multimillionaires to this very day, and the family suffering. And as you mentioned about in 2020, we're not talking about your physical sales being harvested, but we're definitely talking about your academic prowess being harvested. Are you comfortable sharing them with them briefly what you're dealing with right now with that regard?
Well, just recently in 2020, I'm very I'm excited to say that I'm a book writer and a self-publisher. And my business partner and I took about 7 years to design a book that can help millions of people, and especially in Texas that we've done. And so we have this workbook. We've gone to several local universities and school districts. And then we find parts of our workbook at the university right here in my town, Texas University in Corpus Christi, and also in my local school district in Corpus Christi ISD. They're actually retyped and redesigned parts of our workbook, and it's just passing it out freely as if it was theirs, and also the university put their name on it and have been passing it out. So, you know, they don't want to make room. We've been approaching them for years about, let us help you help students do better in math, where 80% of students are not entering to the university and colleges in remedial math classes. And so we designed workbooks to help in that area for their test so they can fill in the gaps and be ready to be on the university and college campuses and stuff. So at this time, we're actually, you know, trying to find a way to let people know that, you know, they're out there stealing from minorities, from people, from, you know, we're a minority women-owned business, trying to help and to further ourselves, bring others with us, because if you don't have a foundation, you drop out of school, you can't go anywhere. But yet, instead of opening and receiving us, they decided just to steal from us.
Cheryl, please, if again, as far as you told me some statistics about nurses and math that blew me away. Can you share that, please?
Yes, we found out from actual data from the University of Texas, from the Dana Center, that they've discovered that 80% of incoming nursing students cannot pass a basic math exam. We're talking about percents, decimals, and fractions. And then if you're talking about, so if you even broaden that, that's just a nurse entering nursing students. We're not talking about those who are going in for doctors. We're not talking about physical therapists. We're not talking about those who are going to go into electrical engineering. And we're talking about just a vast, even an electrician or a plumber can't even, if it's 80% for a nursing student, what about all those others that are struggling out there that can't have a regular living wage job because of basic mathematics?
I mean, I should come in there and say back in the 70s, I was experiencing the same thing with tutoring young Black men and women. I mean, at the time, that's what I was tutoring, who couldn't do basic math, yet they graduated them from high school. So now in 2020, 2019, we're still having the same problem. That tells you the story you really need to know. Somebody or people don't want people to develop these skills in order to improve. But I'm not surprised that universities and professors would steal stuff from you. So it's sad that they do it, but but sometimes it's very difficult to prove when they do this kind of stuff.
Well, no, we can prove it, but they have some kind of law here in the state of Texas called sovereign immunity. And so that's the one thing that's causing problems, because you have to ask permission to sue a state institution and so forth. So they seem like they can do what they wish.
That's terrible.
She was saying the law is called sovereign immunity.
So the state can do anything it wants.
It says that you cannot sue a state institution. So Texas A&M University system is a state institution.
Wow.
So guys, I keep picking on Maya right now. Maya, I keep picking on you because I know very honestly when and if our other guests get here is that many times people don't have conversations. They have arguments, and they don't have facts to base those conversations on. Many times people say, well, that's just the way you feel, and it's my opinion, and then there's your opinion and my opinion, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. No, the truth is never it's somewhere in the middle. The truth is the truth unequivocally. Now one may talk differently about how you get to the truth, but the truth is still going to be the truth. So I said that to ask you, Maya, because being Asian descent and Indian descent and being in this great America of ours, that there's so much racism that's spread across the country. And when people come into this country, most of the time, let me put it this way, it's been my experience. I haven't been in the military. Patrick can speak to that a lot better than me. But it has been my experience that when other cultures, I'm talking about modern, if I can say modern day cultures come into this country, there's already a preconceived notion about Black people because they listen to the white people. Is that what you've experienced? You haven't experienced it, or a little bit of yes, a little bit of no? Can you share with us about that?
Thank you, Mr. Melvin, and I do apologize earlier. I unexpectedly did cut out from this meeting. Apologies to you, apologies to your audience too.
Not necessary.
But
Not necessary.
Thank you. Specifically though, to your question, I don't know that I can really speak to that. I can only speak about just general blatant racism I have seen either in textbooks or just, either in textbooks about the Black American race and how they were exploited in early history, how they were portrayed in early history, and then linking it to anthropology, the image, the very insulting images that happened in the 1800s, or primarily in the 1800s, of the Black man or the Black woman. So I can specifically talk to that, really, about just how unfortunately the Black race has been perceived as negative in the U.S. And also, I think of I will go a little bit deep. I for sure don't have the facts, so please don't quote me on this exactly. But what I can also say culturally is that, unfortunately, I think skin color is what we look at. So even for myself as a brown individual, I mean, it seems like the lighter skinned person seems to be more favored than the darker color skin. So even in my case, the whiter image seems to be the best image that can be out there versus a brown image.
Wow. So in essence, we are just having difficulty with melanin that's in people's skin and choose to hate. Well, listen, as we're talking about this, and Veterans Day was less than 24 hours away, Patrick, obviously, he's told us already that and I don't want to call him Patrick, he's Mr. Stewart. I call him Patrick when just the two of us are talking, but he's Mr. Stewart. And Mr. Stewart has shared with us already that he's retired, but he's still instructing. And I'd like Mr. Stewart, if he will share, if he don't mind sharing with us, to as far as the military go, Mr. Stewart, most of us, when we study history and when we talk to individuals, many times they don't look like us. For instance, I'm going to back up to come back forward. With the Colin Kaepernick situation when he took a knee, everybody wanted to keep saying he's disrespecting the country, he's disrespecting the veterans. Everybody tried to completely, not everybody, but the people that were upset because he was against the police, tried to pretend that they did not understand what he was talking about. Now I'm coming back forward. In the military, and my family is full of military people, Mr. Stewart, and just the studying and that type thing, and actually in my book I write about that, the last book, Just an Ordinary George, is that how America tries to pretend that World War I never happened with people of color, World War II never happened with people of color, the Tuskegee Airmen was just some fantasy. We've all seen, even though they weren't in the military, but NASA is the military, whether we call it that or not, with hidden images and on and on and on and on. Even with the Buffalo, I love the Buffalo Soldiers, and you never hear about how the Buffalo Soldiers rescued Custer on more than one occasion when they were fighting the Indians. You never hear that when Custer went into that last battle, his superiors wanted him, because of the expertise of the Buffalo Soldiers, to carry a regiment, 2 regiments of Buffalo Soldiers with him. His statement to them was, he don't want any brunettes. So history doesn't even talk about that, is that he called the Black people brunettes. So with you being a young military man, Mr. Stewart, do you encounter, or have you encountered individuals that refuses or will vaguely acknowledge that people of color, Black, and I'm not only speaking Black people, but we're talking about Black people right now, were of insignificance on a large scale, and there may have been 1 or 2 that may have deserved some kind of honor? Have you experienced any of that?
Hey, you know, I know we opened up with the Tuskegee thing, so we just came, like I said, we just came off of Veterans Day, but we also just came off of Halloween or Hallelujah night when we went to the church or whatever. But just to show you, I'm definitely dedicated. This is my little guy. So that was his Halloween outfit. We actually made him a Tuskegee Airman. But again, didn't know we were going to talk about. didn't know we were going to be talking about this, but I'm actually representing with one of my Red Tail shirts on. So I try to keep myself grounded as I can in the history of the Air Forces, because I need to know whose shoulder I stand on. So for me, when the question is, have you experienced it? Oh my goodness, every day almost, especially being a young Black male in the medical field. We don't see the tendency, just like anything else, was to put us on the front line, right? You want to put Blacks on the front line. If you look at recruiting for the most part is, and it ties into what we were talking about earlier. I heard Dr. Cadet and Andrea talk about the math, right? So what are they going to do with the recruiting? They put the recruiting stations for certain jobs in communities that don't look like ours, because what they do is they offer the nice jobs and the office type jobs to a certain community. But if you go into the Black community, you will have your frontline soldiers and all this other stuff. Rarely an Air Force recruiting. Coming from Shreveport, coming from Shreveport, if you look at the recruiting, we had Army recruiters on our side of town, but Bossier had the Air Force recruiters. So it's a setup, and they're doing it on purpose. I heard the mention earlier. None of this is happening by happenstance. It is designed this way to not let us indoors or not let us in places. The first thing I thought about when Andrea was talking about the sovereignty law is one of the things that I teach all the time is, if I could say, whatever you do, don't put a needle in somebody's neck. Somebody will say, well, that's crazy. Why would you even mention that? That's because it's written in there because somebody did it. So why do you think that they would write a sovereignty immunity? That's because they've been stealing it forever. So back to the question, when I hear, have I experienced it? I give you a good example, and I try not to be long. I entered the Air Force in 1997, and I talked about if somebody had did it for me, right? Now what I'm doing, trying to break those whys and those norms. Gentleman comes in, he's from some small town in Arkansas. In 1997, he says, man, I've never been around this many colored people in my life. You know, colored in 1997. And he's not really corrected like he needed to be by the leaders. But when he gets where he's going, being that we didn't at the time have racial diversity training, I automatically saw when we got to tech school, when we got to the technical portion of our training, he found his group. All right. And guess what? Those groups promote. Those groups lead Blacks. So now, so now let's go forward. 2003, I'm working, got a young Black male from Atlanta, really, really good. He actually trained me when I came to the floor on some things. And I said, man, this guy's sharp, young guy. I said, but he's gonna be really good. He made some mistake. He made 2 mistakes. But it was mistakes that could have been a letter of counseling, and then probably the second one being reprimand. But they kicked him out. He had a wife that was pregnant on the way, young Black male. They kicked him out. He was gone. Fast forward, 2008. The young lady who kicked him out now, white young lady, she put everything on it that she could. She put everything on this young man that she could, and she kicked him out. Fast forward 2008, I'm supervising a young white lady. She is a habitual liar. She actually told us that she was going one place for her grandmother's funeral and ended up in New Orleans for Mardi Gras. So, so I'm saying we gotta reprimand this person. But when I go to find her record, because I'm probably about 7 months in, I can find nothing on her. I said, well, she's been squeaky clean. But I take it a step further, and I go to the first sergeant and say, you know what, I can't find anything on this person. He said, well, she has nothing, white man. I said, okay, cool. But then I saw somebody, I said, you know what, man? I said, oh girl, she has nothing in her record and she's been in 5 years, but I can't even find like letters of, like the promotion letter. So then he said, oh yeah, that's because when she worked up on the floor, she went to a party and got drunk out of the wazoo. She was doing all that were illegal at the time in the military. And the same person who went out of their way to kick my man out for 2 offenses couldn't do anything with her and just asked that they move her because she just didn't want to supervise her anymore, right? But come to find out, she had done multiple things. And when they turned over to the first sergeant, he actually tore it all out of her file. And when I approached him about it, I said, hey, look, this is what I'm being told that's in her file. He told me to walk away from it. Walk away from it. So my last 10 years in training was spent trying to make sure that young Black males and young Black females, when they came in, that they understood that they had to be at 100%. But they also needed to understand, and I gave it to them every time. I gave them the handbook. These are your rules. Adhere to these. If anybody tries to tell you different, you pull out the book, because you're Black and white. You can't be Black and white. And you argue with Black and white. If we can get ourselves out of emotion, Black and white is it. So have I experienced racism on a level in the Air Force and military period? Yes, I have. I've seen the bias. And I would just hope that no one has to go through it, but I've seen it emboldened in this last administration as well. Not even, I don't think 9-10 months, and I'm sorry to take up the time. And I'll wrap up on this one.
No, you're not taking up the time. I'm just going to ask Dr. Cadet, if he will, if he will share with us how that affects us psychologically once you finish.
Right. So
and then we're going to wrap up.
I gotcha. Not even 9 to 10 months into the election, 2016, I post facts, only facts. And you know me, Coach, I only post facts. And a lot of emotion, I was given the facts. And my supervisor, who is a white woman who supports the current administration, pulls me in the office. I'm not thinking that this is why I'm going in the office, right? She starts off about asking me about work, but then she says, I need to talk to you. So, okay, all right. She says, I've seen your Facebook. So she went on my Facebook, and she said, you talk a lot about history. And I said, okay, all right, so where's this going? And she says, but you never, and with an attitude, never seen a man treated this bad in the president of the United States. You have never seen anybody get called out of their name. And I'm just listening. Like, where is this going? And when she finally just wraps up, she says, well, what do you have to say? I said, I don't have anything to say. First thing I did was I went right to my computer and I blocked her from my Facebook. But then the other thing is I just wrote the incident down on a memorandum for record to make sure that I had it noted. But from then on, everything that I did was met with resistance. And we're talking about everything that I read. I only dealt in black and white. I deal in instructions, AFIs, DOD instructions. That's the only thing I'm dealing in. And I would get fought back on this. And I was like, man, this is crazy. All because of a decision to say, I'm going to roll with the negative side. So yes, it's there. My prayer is always that I stay as long as I can, and I continually try to help people to see past the color. But for those who can't, I want to make sure that they're being called out on the carpet as well. Wow,
that's good. Andrea, I saw your hand a moment ago. Dr. Cadet, would you like to respond to that? I mean, I know that right now we're talking about bridging that gap, but with your expertise and with Mr. Stewart explaining to us what none of us, I'm shaking my head and saying, wow, but I'm not shocked, is that, but I hate to see people go through things. Psychologically, Dr. Cadet, how would you say that would weigh on the average person, including, you know, Maya, even though she's not Black per se, but she's shared with us that because of her not being the lightest, even in her area of being Indian Asian descent, how do you think psychologically that weighs on us all?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question. The trauma that ancestors suffered through. And then, so back in the 1970s and the 80s, I actually really believed that we would get to a point where we would not have to go through this kinds of trauma. So more recently, I came up with this racism-induced stress disorder. Okay, so, and then I've talked about that on LinkedIn on a few occasions, the kind of symptomatology associated with this kind of psychological trauma on purpose. It's not that the people are not doing it and they don't know what they're doing. They specifically want to psychologically abuse us. So they abuse these young men because of some post on Facebook, which had nothing to do with his performance at work, but they still abuse him. So recently I posted another one, a nice paper from a group in California, talking about no matter how high, this one was about Black men, get up in the education system, you still end up facing abuses, resistance, so much so that people develop depression, which is part of the syndrome, the racism-induced stress disorder. So you get anxious, you get depressed. You may have to go look for a psychotherapist. And I will say, if you're gonna look for a therapist, find a Black therapist that you can go to, because you know the white therapists are not able to identify, because they might think you're an angry Black man, angry Black woman, overreacting. They don't have the lived experiences that we have. So I think it's very important. I'm very pleasantly surprised that these young men, Mr. Stewart, is talking so brightly and so fervently about this, because there are times when people go into places like the armed forces, in academia, at universities, where in order to survive, you start basically accept the abuse that will proffered against you. So I'm glad that he's very healthy and that he's able to continue the fight. But we cannot surrender. If our ancestors had surrendered, we wouldn't be where we are today, right? I mean, they've killed all of our other ancestors. They've killed Martin Luther King, they killed Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, all those people, but they didn't give up the fight. So I think it's very important that we tell our young people not to give up the fight, to surrender. But the psychological trauma is real.
Yes, it is. And you know, as you share that, Dr. Cadet, I want to give Andrea an opportunity. She wanted to share something as well. But I'm happy that you're sharing that with our audience, because there's so many times, and all of you know this, and the audience as well, is that, and you hit on it, Dr. Cadet, it's very simple, is that you are an angry this or an angry that, and you're overreacting, when no one wants to accept the fact that they are in fact mistreating and bullying you. And many people, there's some of us that don't take kindly to bullying, and we don't allow it. And I do want to say, Andrea, just before you share, as far as Mr. Stewart, you know, I mean, this young brother is very steady. He's always been. He has a beautiful head on his shoulders and that kind of thing. Because when I went to his school, and I'll be brief, you know, athletically, I would laugh to myself, Dr. Cadet, because when I came to his school, I was already a state champion coach. I had already won a national championship in college. I'd already been in the NFL, all of these things. You know, and then I was working with guys that was doing all of this, and they hadn't even passed high school. But, and we weren't working with our kids like I felt we should have been, to get them prepared for just what you're talking about, and to get them prepared academically, and to get them prepared to be able to make their way in the world. And that's why I have to say personally on this platform that's going to go all over the country, and that's going all over the country, that Mr. Stewart is I mean, this young brother has made steps that a lot of his colleagues were not able to make, because they weren't as strong, they weren't as forceful, they weren't as knowledgeable as he is. And sadly, as we talk about bridging the gap, the gap excuse me, widens because of adults who will not prepare our kids for life after they stop throwing a football, after they stop bouncing a ball, after they stop swinging a bat, after they stop running track. And that's my many times we talk about bridging the gap, you know, most people think in terms of all the detriment that we deal with white people, and that's certainly at the top. But sadly, we, the adults, won't help the gap being bridged, because we won't step up and work with the whole Mr. Patrick Stewart. We just want to work with the part that we're comfortable with. And I just have to share that, because I have been fighting that all of my life. And I'm just happy and so proud of Mr. Stewart as he's on this national platform, because I know the kind of setting that he was exposed to. I mean, not that it was bad. I mean, it was great students, and he can tell you that himself. Great kids, like people any place else. But sadly, because he grew up in an area where there were a lot of people that looked like him, then they were unfairly vilified and all this kind of craziness. And so just to give you guys some insight, this young man that's sitting here sharing with you, and I'm so happy, Dr. Cadet, that he's hearing it from you, someone he's never met, someone that is a doctor, etc., and not just from a coach who loved this young brother. So I'll shut up. Okay, Andrea, you want to share before we go for tonight?
Someone was calling in. Basically, what Patrick was saying, we actually deal with the ASVAB and helping prepare young men and women for the ASVAB. And what keeps them behind is the math. But yet, the lower the score is to get into the military is for is the Army, and then the highest is the Air Force. And so you have to have a higher score. So if you can't get a high score, you can't get inside jobs. So the lower the score is, and then you know that the minorities are struggling in school, are not properly prepared. And so basically they can't get the type of jobs and careers that they want, because they're barely getting through the door to get in. And so they're left with receiving those low end type jobs in the military. And then I wanted to share, when I went into the oil field and I was going for training in Houston, I was the only Black. I was the only female that was in my class during while I was being prepped for my new career in the oil field, which everybody knows that it's very lucrative to be in those fields. But guess what? I look around and I never see anyone that looks like me. And they made sure that I knew that they felt like I did not belong. And so here I am, a female and a Black female. And so very, very often they tried to do everything they could to make me quit. I knew I had to stay up there during the exams of the 95, the 98, the 100%, and do better than the other people, because they were ready to get rid of me as soon as they possibly could, because I did not belong there. And so, there was many times I'm during breaks in the crying, praying, and trying to regroup because of the bullying, the abuse, the beat down and stuff. And it also carried over into being in the school system. I was the only Black in my school, and but there was nowhere to go to express what was happening. And so you had to endure, because the people at the top, it's going to be retaliation. and so forth. So it just, so there's always felt like there was nowhere to go, nowhere to express and complain, nowhere to let people know that something else different is happening.
I think this is the issue of nowhere to go. It's an issue that repeats itself everywhere, right? So if you go to HR is fielded by people who are going to report you up their hierarchy. That's one of the reasons why I said, if you're suffering from the bullying or the abuse, you need to find yourself somebody, a Black therapist outside of the system where you go to and actually deal with whatever anxiety, depression that you might be going through, instead of try to go through up the chain of command, because the chain of command is not going to be supportive. And I'm sure Patrick went through that when he was in the Air Force. You cannot depend on them to provide you with equal fairness. So I think that's why I keep on saying we are all we've got. We are the ones who are gonna have to take care of each other so that we can bridge the racial gap. We cannot depend on great white saviors. Great white saviors have already done what they can do. So we should have learned in 2019, 2020, especially this summer, that we are all we've got. We are the one that our ancestors were dreaming of, and that we need to push forward. We need to be able to educate like you're doing, us brothers and sisters, to learn how to do better in mathematics so that they can get those better jobs and get a better pay. But if we don't do this for ourselves, I think we are going to be at a loss. Complaining about billionaires and multimillionaires who are always going to want to be multimillionaires, it's a good thing to get off our chest, but we need to step up and really take care of ourselves and not worry so much about what these people are doing, because they're not going to change. They've shown us since 1619 that this is what we're going to get, abuse. So I think I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing, and I'd like Melvin to give you my email. Maybe we can interact and do some things together, because when it comes to math, I'm pretty good with math. Okay.
Fantastic. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen.
I would just like to say this.
So kind. Any parting words?
I just want to say this, Coach. So, Dr. Cadet, I didn't leave unscathed, and the advice that you're giving, I said I didn't leave the Air Force unscathed. I did leave with the diagnosis of PTSD, right? But it's amazing because what you're saying is so true. When I actually went to the mental health, I initially, with no diagnosis, I was kind of like sitting in a room. Basically, I had a young white female who was my provider at the time, and I left after three sessions with absolutely nothing. But a good friend of mine, he works for the Public Health Corps, Black man, Dr. Dwayne Buckingham. Wish he was here. But I told Doc, I said, man, this is what I'm dealing with, because this is now I'm dealing with the after of my supervisor, right? And now I'm actually going to get seen. The actual trauma that happened was earlier on in my, but I tried to mask it and tried to be manly, right? Try to do this thing. But finally, when I go get seen, I'm kind of looked at like, nothing's wrong with you. But when I talk to him, he says, go back. So it's 8 months, 9 months, 10 months, I go back and I asked for, he told me, just what you're saying, ask for somebody specific. So they didn't have any Black physicians, but they gave me a young lady who was basically their, I don't want to say a throwaway, but she probably had about as much problems as we did. She was a Puerto Rican, but she was from Puerto Rico. Deep accent, and she did feel a lot of what I was going through. So she knew, and she said, well, why did you stop coming? I said, well, look, this is what happened. She said, you've been diagnosed with PTSD. They never even told me. So now I'm still wrestling with this thing at home. So long story short, I got the help that I needed. I've been practicing my mindfulness and doing everything that I'm supposed to do. And it's been a blessing for me and my family. And it's been a blessing to all those I can be able to share with when I see them wrestling with things too. So I agree. Somebody who looks like us.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah.
So, ladies, wow, Patrick, wow, man. Wow. I have to say, as I gather myself, because I know that young man right there, and I know how people do other people with no remorse, no humanity whatsoever, and even to the point, sadly, of trying to make you think something is wrong with you. So I have to, Mr. Stewart, man, my heart goes out to you. I mean, the whole conversation that we're talking about now, about bridging the gap, and the gap is going to be bridged when we get out things go forward. But I just want to say it's been great having you guys here. I want us to, now there are several panels that the King Center have, and I'll be doing other civic dinners, and it's all about coming together and discussing racism openly with diverse groups and that kind of thing. And I would hope that we can stay together as a group as I infuse our other people. I'll be staying in contact with all of you and letting you know when we're doing this again, give you plenty of notice so that we can talk about things, because that is the problem right now, is that people don't have conversations, they have arguments. So we want to present conversations. And you guys certainly have been very gracious, and you certainly have been great tonight. And I just want to thank each and every one of you for being here. And if you have any closing remarks, please feel free to make those at this time.
Thank you all for a great chat.
And it's been great. Dr. Cadet, Mr. Patrick Stewart, Ms. Andrea Reynolds, and Ms. Maya Bahl, we thank you so very much. I see our other guests did not make it, but they missed a treat. So have a great and blessed night. I'm